I'm Amber Wachowski. I'm a professor of political science and director of the Marquette Civic Dialogues program currently. And I'm one of the co-chairs for this commission on democracy and citizenship. I'm going to let my co-chair introduce himself as well as our commission members introduce themselves. So I'll turn to...
I'm Daniel Klinghardt. I teach political science at College of the Holy Cross, and I'm the other co-chair for the commission. You can get the report on through the brochure, but if you want to scan here, you can also find the report here. We're going to ask the commission members who are here to introduce themselves. So, Kim, we can start with you.
Hi, my name is Kim Daniels. I'm the director of the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University. Really glad to be here.
Hi, Eric Owens. I'm director of the International Studies program, and I'm in the theology department at Boston College.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Tayus. I teach in the School of Social Work at St. Louis University. Been there for 24 years.
Morning, Erica Moreno, professor and chair in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Creighton University.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Laura Nichols. I'm professor and chair of the Department of Sociology at Santa Clara University.
Hi, I'm Julie Schumacher-Cohen. I'm assistant vice president for community engagement and government affairs at the University of Spring.
Wonderful. So we're going to, Daniel and I are going to just take a few minutes to introduce the work of the commission. But our session is actually a lot more interactive, so we're going to get right to it. Our commission was tasked with, quote, the forces that threaten our commitment to the discovery of truth, the increasing polarization that threatens civil discourse and communal discernment for the common good, and how these might be addressed in the educational programs for our students. So our commission met several times over Zoom in the intervening months, and we divided ourselves initially into 3 task forces. One, with Catholic social teaching as the cornerstone of that group's work. One, to develop and implement a survey of AJCU institutions. So if you were one of the people that took that survey, thank you. And one on what we call the knowledge, skills, and dispositions of democratic citizenship. In reflecting over the course of the intervening months, we began actually reflecting a bit on Father Sosa's talk he gave back in 2022, where he talked about the challenges of the 3 Ps: populism, polarization, and post-truth, and the ways in which those challenges can perpetuate errors, mistrust of institutions, narrow tribalism, and dissembling as a path to power. Through the report, you might see some parallels a little bit to Ibu Patel's presentation plenary address that we just heard. In reflecting, our group kind of settled on four claims, and the report develops them a little bit in detail. In thinking about articulating goals for AJCU institutions, for what it would be to educate in the areas of citizenship and democracy, we focused on 4. First, and most prominently, on what Pope Francis has called, calling upon each of us, all of us collectively, to become experts in the art of encounter. So that's claim number 1, that we need to work to become experts in the art of encounter. Second, in reflecting on what all of us are doing at our institutions and taking a critical look at what folks are telling us, or the work that's being done, a real clear sense that we need to actively prepare citizens for democratic citizenship. And we're going to talk for much of our session about how we might think about and ask ourselves how the work that we're doing in this area. Third, that in educating students for the demands of democracy, we're not just talking about the local, but really it's about educating our students for global citizenship. So claim number 3 is to think globally. And finally, reflecting on democracy and citizenship at our institutions, a real sense that Jesuit universities must model the principles of citizenship on our campus. And what might this look like? What are the sorts of questions we should be asking ourselves? So with that, I'm going to turn it to Daniel, who's going to talk about the sort of ways in which we kind of sought to bring this work to life.
Great, thank you. So this group it's amazing the kind of expertise and the kind of knowledge that folks had. We had some really great conversations and some great back and forth. And we also found that there is a lot of material out there. And if you're at all involved in this work, you probably know some of these things. And we were constantly finding these sort of wonderful reports with wonderful, very hopeful models for how to teach civics. And then you'd find out that it was published in 2006 and not really much had been done since then. So our sense was not that we had to recreate the wheel, but that there was a lot of material that we could bring together. And instead of providing a prescriptive model or a template for everyone to follow, we thought we would follow the Jesuit tradition and invite everyone at their own institutions to engage in a kind of self-examine. How are we doing in educating our students for democracy? What kind of possibilities are out there for us to do better? What are some ways that we can really sort of start by examining ourselves before we move forward? And so when you get into the report, you'll find a lot of links to a lot of sources that have already been put out there, a lot of work that is already being done very well by Jesuit institutions and other kinds of institutions. And so the hope is that you will find inspiration in there somewhere to bring to your campus. But the core sort of template for our examine draws on 6 items, and we're going to turn those items over to you in just a moment, but just to kind of cover them generally. If you're at all involved in this kind of work, you know that civic education really builds on knowledge, skills, and dispositions. What kind of knowledge do students need? What kind of skills do they need to actually be able to take that knowledge into the real world? What are the kinds of attitudes that lead to productive democratic citizenship? We also see ourselves as sort of adding to that, for the AJCU institutions in particular, these 3 other elements. Global citizenship. This is at the core of the Jesuit idea. We are not just focused on America, we are focused on the world. Some things that might make us particularly good American citizens might not make us particularly good global citizens. And so we want to really encourage folks to think about how they're preparing students globally. I will also add Tom Bankoff, who was also on our commission. He's not here, but his global citizenship program does a really good job of capturing this. 5th, citizenship in the Christian faith. And in saying this, I'm aware, I know at Holy Cross and maybe at some of your other institutions, our Catholic tradition can seem a little bit alienating sometimes to folks. It can seem a little bit like a colorful part of a tradition that we kind of refer to, but we sometimes run from. What we are suggesting here is not that there is an only one right Catholic way to do it, but to recognize that in this particular time, when religion and nationalism are so closely intertwined in a lot of ways, that we have a special responsibility to take the students who are coming to us, who may be hearing messages in which that intertwining of religion and nationalism is the right way to do it, and to help them think about healthy ways of bringing their faith into the world. So we're not saying this is only for Christians, right? We should help our students think about their faith traditions broadly, as Ibu Patel was saying today, but that we have a particular responsibility in this area. And then finally, democracy on campus. I think oftentimes we as academics are very good at pointing to forces off campus and explaining why they are insufficiently democratic, and then not really realizing the lack of democracy that we experience on our own campus. Either if that's from the point of view of our students, and this past semester, I think a lot of our students had an unusual experience with what democracy actually looks like on campus, and it's an appropriate time for us to think about that. Our faculty, is there faculty governance in a meaningful way that models to students and to other people that this is what democracy should look like? And our staff and contingent faculty. If we are complaining about inequality in the world but perpetuating it at home, that's its own kind of problem. So we're going to turn this over to you. We've got a sort of abbreviated version of our examine model. If you go to page 47 of our report, you'll get the more thorough series of questions. And what we would like, am I standing in the way of the thing? Yeah. What we'd like for you folks to do is just talk amongst yourselves and reflect. And I have to go back here because we have a couple of ways of framing the questions. And that is, what is happening on your campus? And then what are the obstacles to our doing more along these lines? We're going to break the meeting here into 5 groups. Everybody is going to talk about developing skills. That seems like one of the areas where we had a whole lot of productive conversation, and so we have handouts here to guide you through that. And then each group is also going to take one of the other elements of the exam and talk about that if we have time. We have about 25 minutes. We might go a little bit over for that if we need to. Each group will have one commission member or maybe 2 commission members as part of it. So should we just let people choose where they want to go? So why don't we have, let's see, the commission members stand up. Who's group number 1?
Group number 1.
So group number 1, you're going to do skills, but also democratic knowledge. And Sabrina here will lead your group there. Group number 2, Julie is going to lead skills and also reflect on dispositions, democratic dispositions. Group 3, Eric is going to do skills, but also global citizenship. Group 4, Kim is going to reflect on skills, but also citizenship, democracy, and the Christian faith, as is appropriate. And group number 5, Laura and Erica are going to talk about skills, but then also democracy on campus. So why don't you guys just sort of spread out, and then you can choose where you want to go. And look, we might spend most of the time focusing on skills, so don't feel like you've got to specialize too much. And if you end up want to go to a group and that's where like 20 people are, could we kind of parcel it out a little bit more?
Are there available spaces outside this room?
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah, absolutely. You could go outside of the room.
So we have how many groups, Daniel? We have 5?
5 groups.
Okay.
If we can sort of come back together as a group for the report back period. While you're doing that, we've got a form here, and you can use this QR code to get to the form. What we're trying to do on the form is collect your interest and collect your expertise so that we can continue this conversation and sort of form a group that is interested in this kind of thing. And so there's a little bit of information gathering, but also what could you use and what could you offer to the rest of us, right? So we're hoping that we can, in this, gather some resources and gather some areas where people feel like they are in need of support. Of course, I will do that while we're reporting out. I'm a professor,
That's inevitable. That's the inevitable thing. All right, so we're gonna we finish up quarter after, right? That's the. Do I have the time?
12:30 is lunch. Yeah. So
okay, so we'll wrap up and we're gonna aim for 12:15. What we're going to have groups do, hopefully each group kind of has someone that you've designated as the person that will report out, but let's just go around. We'll ask each group to spend 2 to 3 minutes tops. We'll try to make this brief, but to reflect what were the kind of big takeaways. These questions are really to guide conversation, and hopefully you've been inspired to maybe take these back to your respective institutions and to continue that inquiry. Kim, maybe I'll turn to your group first. And we'll kind of just go around. There's 5 groups total here.
So our group was Citizenship, Democracy, and Christian Faith. And it was great conversation. So much going on in everybody's campus, and it's just always so wonderful to be in these environments. We first talked about the skills and how we learn the skills for democratic participation. One person has first-year seminars at their school that really talks about these, how we have conversations across difference. Sometimes media literacy is one of those, but it's not. I guess that media literacy is one of the sort of first year seminars, and that's another important one. One of the obstacles, though, is that it kind of disappears, right? So after that first experience, how can you keep it going after that? Another place at our school, I think often there are robust free speech guidelines with clear guardrails, and having clear guardrails makes the conversations, challenging conversations, easier by making sure that you give wide range to those conversations. People talked about having dialogue between faculty and students outside of the classroom about how to talk together and what that might look like. So you don't have the pressure of performance or grades on these conversations and can learn from each other. And then the challenge of which conversations get shut down. And the other challenge of what this environment is like between now and November or now and January, and how a lot of people just want to retreat from that. And how do we lean into it? And in that, I did a little plug for Amy Ullman's book about polarization in the classroom, which I think is very important and effective as one tool to approach this. How about knowledge? We talked about experiential knowledge through the Student Senate and making sure that leaders at a university engage with those students in a way that makes them know that they are listened to and that their voices are important. We talked about service learning as a really important place where you learn about how to gain this knowledge, but also the obstacles might be a lack of imagination about politics that students sometimes come in with, and expanding that knowledge, so through exposure to community organizing and other forms of politics. Finally, we talked about the Christian faith, how that engagement, the Catholic social teaching tradition around principles of human dignity and justice and the common good can be an essential substantive part of these conversations. And what we learned, of course, is number one, that these principles adhere in all faith traditions and for people with no faith tradition at all. So it is really a kind of vocabulary that we can use to approach these issues. We talked about the importance of encounter and seeing the reality of people, their human faces is an important part of our tradition as well, and in particular engagement with the vulnerable through immersion, through the concept of solidarity, through other practices. So a very robust discussion. Thanks very much. Take the floor.
I think there was a group, Julie's group is back here.
We actually didn't really get into dispositions. We got to a lot of other stuff. So we talked about programs again that are going well on our campuses. BC has a civil discourse program. Georgetown has done intergroup dialogue and specifically had student leaders of different religious groups that have met for a long time and built that foundation, which was helpful over this last year. A seminar on religion, morality, and contested claims of justice. Immersion experiences, the model of the Keto Border Initiative, which many of us are familiar with, which is humanize, accompany, and complicate, and how those three are important principles. Gonzaga and Seattle have an advocacy summit that they do that's more around training students and engaging with their elected officials, but also is localized to the Northwest. In Scranton, we have a political dialogues long-standing initiative as well. Some of the things that we felt were working well in terms of the skills. We named some challenges around all of this. Just at this moment to bring these kinds of programs into expand the campus space, and students that are not necessarily in political science are already inclined to do this kind of discourse, if that's a challenge and those students are not interested or it's hard to kind of expand it into other places, that there is a hopelessness about politics right now among students and how to handle that. We reflected a little bit and debriefed a little bit on the program this morning, and just some challenges like media literacy, misinformation, material harms that are part of the reality of polarization. Siloed work, so many of us are doing different things with discourse and dialogue work, but it might be siloed between different departments and offices on a given campus. We got a little bit into this group over here and just saying, do we as faculty and administrators model the kind of discourse that we want to see, that our students should be seeing, and how can we do better there? And then also just around the tensions that emerge for institutions around sort of risk aversion and reputational sort of questions with our social justice mission and how that is all interacting. And then let's see, what else can we talk about? And then our biggest sort of ending was, we went through the three, we focused a little bit on skills and countercultural action, and that students and faculty and staff, if there's a gap in terms of, if we're going to have a unique mission as Jesuit institutions and do these things uniquely, a lot of our folks are not really familiar with what Jesuit really means, what the Jesuit tradition is, So how can we expect them to get there if they really haven't come in or are knowledgeable about that? So we just felt that was a real challenge. Thinking about also Ignatian and Jesuit and what these terms mean and what's more appealing or applicable, and how students may not be very engaged generally with their religious tradition, and so how do we get them to be interested in the Jesuit tradition? So, anyone want to?
Got it.
Okay.
Eric, maybe we'll come to your group. You've had the global
Yeah, we're
perspective
starting,
as
Colin's
well.
going to report out for our group.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't know, every other group didn't have to do this, but okay. My name's Colleen Dalaval, I'm from Boston College, and our group was globalization. So we talked a little bit, a lot of the things that you've already mentioned, so not going to belabor any points, but the importance of encounter, the importance of seeing ourselves as a global society, and I think that some of the things that we talked about as being challenging, particularly over the last year, and I think all of you might be able to agree with some of these, are that the polarization that's happening, what we see locally, is also globally. And some people have felt it for years, and we're feeling elements of it now, but also trying to think of the way we can lean into this to build skills around discourse and dialogue. Those are two areas, I think, that Kimmy mentioned that right away, that we see a lot of value in. We talked about centering individual stories with intention, understanding that there are also leaders within the communities that might not hold credentialing or academic degrees, but could be very rich in deep cultural knowledge that we can learn from. On the other side, when we talk about internationalization versus globalization was something that came up as a topic in our conversation as well. And knowing the difference there and being able to take students that benefit from immersive experiences, but also leveling the playing field to find access points where that's not just a luxury, that it becomes a reality that we talk about in all the spaces that we occupy. We also brought up COIL as a technique. For those of you who aren't, I wasn't familiar with what COIL meant, so I will explain it. It's collaborative online international learning as an opportunity to be collaborative in that space and learn from folks in other communities alike. And then we talked a little bit too about the importance of continuing the conversation around how are we preparing folks in similar spaces to be able to be facilitators of globalization in this world. With the digital age, online learning, the transmission of information in a split second, we have to be prepared. And we feel like we are uniquely positioned as Jesuit institutions to be able to lean into this with intention and leverage our Catholic social teaching. So that's kind of what we talked about.
We'll go to, I think, Laura and Erica.
All right. All right, so I took a lot of notes. We had a very, very rich conversation around all the different skills. So we talked about participatory skills, soft skills and dialogue, countercultural action, and at the very end, information skills. We sort of peppered the conversation with some discussion about faculty governance. It did come up, but we didn't get to it. Police, oh, that's a TBD. Okay, so I'm going to try to get a couple key things, and someone please shout out if I got something wrong here. When we talked about participatory skills, we really spent a little bit more time there because our colleagues are doing wonderful things. There are a variety of different programs across the AJCU dealing with centers that deal specifically with public engagement, having very active service organizations and service learning as a means to help guide students into participatory action. The IFTJ was another really good example since they added the Advocacy Day. But often participatory skills are most likely to pop up in specific courses, often in political science classrooms. Often the students you get that are most active are self-selecting in. So we did talk about some challenges in terms of going beyond a few disciplines, addressing international students' needs too, so incorporating them into that, going beyond the various pockets on campus. Someone mentioned silos earlier. And connecting centers and all these different efforts specifically to action is a big challenge. So highlighting the local connections here is one way in which we can get around that. We talked about dialogue a lot, and it was really important. Several members in our group really were keen about pointing out that these dialogues are more difficult because we're often dealing with students who have the direct experience of the pandemic. So the way in which they deal with each other on a one-on-one basis is different. So addressing those basic interactions, interpersonal skills, often requires bringing in professional help and bringing in different resources to get them to have these conversations because they are not wanting to have them for a variety of reasons, sometimes maybe because of a lack of hope, and that's also a very important challenge. So leveraging professional help to get those discussions on board. Centers, this is what a number of really good examples here. Centers with lots of expertise serving as models for those discussions. So providing guardrails in real time and providing examples for how to have those conversations on all kinds of tricky issues. We talked about restorative circles as well as an option. Countercultural action is a challenging one because we've all seen a lot more of this as of late. So how to get folks, we kind of started with challenges, how to get folks together when they stand on opposing sides of an issue is difficult, not just for students, but it's difficult for us as well. So that is a big issue. Also, how to get students to show up. We've had members of our group who come from commuter campuses, but even from non-commuter campuses. This is a relevant question, right? You may put the programming together, but how do you make sure that they're actually going to be in the room to engage in that kind of conversation and engage in action in a productive way? So there was also some discussion about, presenting this as a conversation, right? So presenting possible options of a variety of different actions that students may take, right? And then going through a process of discernment to allow students to make decisions, but also stand by what issues they're interested in. We sort of left off with information skills, and we kind of didn't finish fully, but obviously there's a big challenge about students engaging in alternative conversations on social media that we're not privy to. And that having a real profound impact on whether or not they engage, how they engage, and who they engage with. And then we had a nice little beginning of a discussion before we had to end about campus policies, right? Doxing, for instance. What is it? Do campuses define it? Is there a policy for it? So there's something where campuses can actively engage in some of this and provide an environment, provide the guardrails for our students as we engage in these discussions. Did I miss it? Okay, all right.
And finally, Sabrina and knowledge. Oh, Smile, do you want me? Oh, gosh. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat what I think a lot of groups have already said. What I think came out of our conversation was that it seems like at some campuses, there is a group of people that has maybe emerged around nonpartisan voter education and engagement. John Carroll, it sounds like they're going to be launching this really cool civic dashboard this fall that kind of came out of those efforts. And so I guess for us, there's this question about how do we take that beyond to thinking more broadly about civic engagement and civic life. So that might mean that we're thinking about who should be at a campus, at the table talking about these efforts at our respective institutions. We talked, we were the knowledge group, and yet we found ourselves really talking in very sociological terms, I think, about civic friendship and how we bring students together, particularly when students today don't have either because of the pandemic, maybe it's been disrupted in some sense, but also not having great productive examples in the real world of people coming together across lines of difference to talk about what matters to them and what we might do to make our world better. But maybe we can lean in a little bit to efforts around peer leadership. Let's see here. We had this wonderful reflection on how did we all become so apathetic, and that we've kind of ceded responsibility and engagement to a very smaller group that's more intense, that is louder, but how do we re-engage and bring students in? And maybe this is in a first-year seminar, core curricula, co-curricular programs, experiential learning. Georgetown has a, I can't remember what CALL stands for, and I'm not even sure if I got the right.
Area legislative learning Learning lab.
There we go. These applied experiential learning. This idea of applied, and maybe even think Georgetown's unique. You know, you're in the capital, national capital, but I think someone mentioned like we're all in our communities, and Kim, I think you mentioned like what are other sort of models, community organizing, others that might be more local that actually might open up space for students to think more productively about politics, and not as such a terrible word. All right, with that, I think that was, did we get all groups?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, am I wrapping up?
Well,
Are
I
you?
was going to say, I think I fixed the link.
Oh, okay, good.
And it would be nice to be able to sort of share what we've learned and share resources. The idea here, this is fascinating. I really enjoyed going around and hearing what different groups were talking about, different insights, different programs that people are doing. I think what we're encouraging folks to do is to take this to your campus and have this conversation in a kind of intentional way on your campus. And you know best how to make that happen if it's something you're interested in, but we would just encourage you to do that. And we think that that's the way that we can make some steps to reclaim some of the area in politics for something positive in a space that is so often negative now. So with that,
I think that's
okay.
it. Please take
Well, thank you very much for
we've
the
got a hand back there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I'm Amy Ullman from Georgetown. I just wanted to mention there's something I haven't heard, which is talking about pace. That so much of the tension emerges from the need to feel like you need to give a rapid and immediate response. Yeah. And so it might be interesting just to throw that in, you know, the question of helping people take the pace down as a way of also addressing the reactivity. So just as an extra thought.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
One more round of applause for our group.